And we're live. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Bearded Men of Real Estate Show. I'm Ray. Say hi, Dan.
What? Wait, where am I? What? What am I doing?
And that's Dan. Yes, that's Dan. He is, I would say you're on location, I guess you could say. So Dan
I'm
is
on location. Yes.
that's right. Dan is in Colorado today. So because he's in Colorado, we tried to join, but there was a little bit of a kerfluffle with the Wi-Fi, which meant that there's not really any Wi-Fi. So he's joining me via Clubhouse. So I'm going to be pretty quick with my mutes so that I can get in. That way, no one in Clubhouse gets the massive echoes. But you're hearing me talk about Clubhouse. If you haven't joined the show on Clubhouse, you can. We are in the Real Estate Networking Club. If you're in the Clubhouse room, go up to the very top. There's a little greenhouse. Hit that greenhouse and make sure you're following the Real Estate Networking Club. Also follow anybody that's up here, all the moderators, especially Logan. He's joined. We're going to cover one of his articles today. So if you can stick around maybe in about 15 minutes or so, we're going to be talking about one of his articles. And I kind of want him to give us a general synopsis of some of what he's talking about. Thought it was really, really interesting. We have like 20 articles today. So we're going to go very quickly through a lot of it, from lumber prices to the new 30-year rate, which Kelly, who's in Clubhouse, loves it when we quote rates because she's a lender. And then, or she's on the lending side, I guess you could say. And then we're going to talk about surging home prices, truly extraordinary surge in home prices in April. We're also talking about, there's an article that says, as the boom begins to fizzle. So I want to get you guys' opinion and see if that boom is fizzling. Then we're going to talk about Logan's article, then foreclosures and evictions. So we have a lot of information on that front that came out last week. Biden renewing a foreclosure ban, but for how long? The CFPB is talking about foreclosure ban, making it more difficult for servicers to foreclose. Is this good news or bad? And then we have three fun articles. One is the pool frenzy. Are people in your area, if you're a real estate agent, still looking for pools in their own backyard, or have they loosened up on that a little bit? And are high risk homes cheaper? In other words, homes that are at risk of natural disasters, are they less expensive? CoreLogic has new data on that. And we'll be looking at a way you can buy a house, design it online. Actually, you could design this house online, add it to your cart and buy it, and then it will be built for you. Is this something you would consider? That seems a little risky. But I have buried the lead a little bit. We have a co-host, a guest host, and he's one of my favorite. There's also a gnat in my office. This guy's one of my favorite Clubhouse guys. I met him on Clubhouse, and he actually has a beard just for this show. So I'm going to bring him up. Justin, what's up, man? Thanks for joining us. There is Justin Conocow. Is it Conocow or Conoco?
It's Conoco. I'd say 90% of the world says Conocow, and you can call me a potato if you want. I'm just as comfortable.
There you go. Super handsome, bearded fella from the great north. Where are you located, Justin?
So London, Ontario, Canada is probably the easiest point for people to find us on a map. That's kind of the hub of our market. We cover the whole southwestern pocket of Ontario. So anything north of Michigan, till about Kitchener, Cambridge, about an hour and a half west of Toronto. And I spend a lot of time in the States, actually. We travel out of the States. We fly out of Detroit. I go down to Michigan probably more often than I go to Toronto. So I like looking at things from both perspectives. And my previous employer was a massive Tigers fan, so much he had a restaurant in Troy. So we would always go down for Tigers games. And yeah, big affinity for
y'all can't travel anywhere right now, though, right?
No, it's crazy.
It's so borders closed. Are you on lockdown or no?
No. So we were on lockdown. I equate it to, I almost wish instead of us having color codes and zones, they would have just named the different stages after dinosaurs, because that would have provided more clarity than what we're in right now. Every time they make an announcement, we don't really know what it means. We moved to stage 2, for example, today, which means now restaurants that are patio only can have tables of 6 people instead of 4. So that was the big announcement. You can go into stores kind of, sort of, but only if they have an exterior entrance, and a lot of them you need to have an appointment for. So that massive lack of clarity. But wow. I think the government's being put in a position where the rest of the world is opening up. Places like Quebec, Montreal, that were huge issues previously, like they're going towards no mask policies and wide open. So I think they're being forced kind of down that same trajectory. It's just taken us a little bit longer than everybody else.
Interesting. And are you having like massive outbreaks there? Or is it just about where it is everywhere else in the world? It's just politics.
Politics. I think our numbers are actually lower than that of Florida. The one thing about London, and I will address this because I have a lot of friends in the medical space, is London, Ontario is like that movie, The Village, where you have this town in the middle of nowhere that everybody forgot about until they flew over and they're like, oh yeah, that's there. But we have world-class hospitals, right? We have 2 hospitals that actually bring people in from the Mayo and the Cleveland Clinic to train cutting edge technology. So when COVID happened, a lot of my friends that are surgeons and people that are in that space said all of the tertiary and secondary markets that didn't have the equipment or the things you needed to deal with COVID all came here. So I know our hospitals got overloaded. Wow. They had actually turned like the ICU unit into a COVID station. They were bringing in these big like crates to put people in to service them as well too. But as far as the recent numbers, as far as I know, we're comparable to a lot of places that are wide open right now.
Very interesting. Well, cool.
And
well, thanks for joining us on the show. Go ahead, Dan.
Well, I just wanted to say, I feel like, being an unknowing Southerner, a Southern neighbor, I feel like your government was pretty favored, or looked upon well by your people. And now with this, it's like, dude, what are you guys doing? Like it seems like it's taken a turn, the feeling up there, at least from the, my friends up in the Great North.
Very, very accurate. Massive lack of leadership. I think that's what we've seen, right? Is, political people aren't always in a position where they're there to lead. They're more concerned about buying votes in a lot of cases. And it was funny to a certain degree to watch the prime minister, who technically runs the country, realize that the premier of Ontario, who was the guy that runs Ontario, was getting more flack than him. So the prime minister kind of went super quiet. He's like, well, I'm just going to let him take all the heat because elections are coming eventually, right? So it definitely turned.
Yeah, no, the election didn't have any impact on the America and how we viewed the pandemic. All right, so on that note, Dan, before we get into all these articles, would you tell everyone what this show is actually all about?
I would love to. Now, when Ray and I met here on the interwebs about 74 years ago, before Al Gore invented it, Ray and I actually invented it, but I had an idea for a show because I am in fact a bearded man of real estate. I know you guys can't see that today, but I am. I still have the beard, I promise. I noticed something very interesting about Ray.
What's that, Dan?
He loves lumber futures, loves them.
I have been getting a kick out of lumber futures lately, and if you missed my reel last week, you gotta check it out. I'm a little bit late on the uptick, but it still applies because lumber futures are still way higher than they were. So yeah, go to my Instagram, check out thank you, Dan, for promoting my my reel. I appreciate it.
Always. It's always meant. I'm only in it for promotion of Rare Eye. That's it. But no, I obviously noticed that he's a beautifully bearded man, but also I noticed that he loves giving value up front to not only his clients, but also just to humans in general. So the show is about being more as an agent, but also being more as a human.
Yeah, and one of the ways we feel like it's important to give back is just to know what in the world is going on so that we as real estate professionals can consult with our clients and help hopefully guide them to a good decision with what many people is their largest investment. So thank you guys for joining the show. If you're joining us live on Facebook or YouTube, you can comment just like Mario did. He said, "What up, Ray and Dan?" Thanks for joining the show, Mario. Producer Matt's also in there in the YouTube comments. We haven't had any Facebook comments yet, but on Facebook, you could also comment. We could display your comment. We could talk about you, or we could also talk about your comment. If you're in Clubhouse, just raise your hand. I've got a couple of people that are modding. They'll make sure that you're actual real human, and then they can add you to the conversation. Don't forget to mute the mic. But don't worry if you forget. I can't really hear you until I mute my own mic. So we have kind of a safeguard there. Actually, it'll probably be a little more open because Daniel is in the clubhouse today. Oh, there you go. Jeremy James on cue says in Facebook. Thank you, Jeremy. Thanks for joining the show, buddy. And then Dan, he's also on Facebook. He says hi, ha ha ha. Thanks, Dan. All right. Well, with that, Justin, weird. Have you ever watched Wayne's World?
Oh, I have, my friend.
All right, so we're about to get into the headlines, and as we do, we're going to do the Wayne's World transition. Are you ready?
I'm so excited.
Without me being able to see Ray.
Yeah, you can't see it. We'll just only hear Dan through the ether. Yes. All right, let's do this. Very good. And just like that, we're in the headlines. All right. So the first story out of the gate, it's a sad story, but we're going to cover it. There was a condo that collapsed in Miami. Actually, on the pre-show show, or actually, it was what do we call it? The show prep show. That's what it is. The show prep show that we did yesterday on Clubhouse. A lady named Crystal that's from that area was in the chat, and she gave us a little more details about what happened. There's an article on it from magazine.realtor. But basically what happened in short is that people weren't collecting enough money from the condo association in order to address the basic maintenance concerns for the building. And over time, the maintenance got worse and worse and worse. And they had a quote that was like $160,000 per condo owner. The condo value, she said, was somewhere around $60,000. So there's no way they could pay that. And then this is kind of what happened. So keep your eye out in how that affects you guys. I foresee some legislation happening that would force condo associations for better maintenance and things like that if they're not policing themselves. But we'll kind of see what happens. I did want to mention that though, and let people know our hearts and thoughts are with those that were impacted by that super sad story. But so we'll kind of keep your ear to the ground, see what happens, see if anything comes of that. Hopefully it will, because I'm thinking about condo units in our area. They're not exposed to the same sea breeze and salts and stuff like that they think had to do with Miami, but still it's an important thing to consider whenever you're buying a condo. Make sure the condo association is doing the maintenance and upkeep. So that's
and one thing.
Go ahead,
just
Dan.
another tip. I don't want to cut Justin off. I can't literally see anything, but the one of the things too is your CC&Rs. I don't know if that's a national thing or a worldwide thing, but we get what's called CC&Rs, which is essentially disclosures from the HOA and all their minutes and everything. And then also it has in there their reserves. So you want to make sure that you're checking their reserves. What does that condo association have reserved in case anything like this happens, or if there's just termite damage or some of the different exterior walls are falling over or crumbling, how healthy is that HOA? They need to be collecting that stuff for that reason. It's all rainy day funds.
And to Dan's point as well, I think who is in charge of the HOA, right? And who's actually got a voice on the board if you're invested into a unit like that. And, you may get the minutes in the mail and think they don't matter, but you have to be involved or you don't really have a say. And some of the best managed buildings I've seen have business people that are, consults or people that act in an advisory position that sit on the board and are doing extremely well. This story, when I read it, Ray, was pretty interesting because we recently had a building collapse here mid-construction.
Oh, really?
So yeah, it was huge. It was national headlines in Canada, and they were building a building on Wonderland Road, and literally it was cast in place, and they basically poured the floor collapsed, and 2 guys got killed. Huge story in the news too. So hearts go out to anybody in this situation because we went through it recently. But I think the onus of care on the community and the industry as a whole is to take their jobs, very seriously, make sure that they're doing the right due diligence before and after, and not be afraid to look at what you're doing now and what you need to change to succeed in the future.
Yeah, that's good. Good points. Good points all around. The next story I'll get to is the lumber futures. We've been keeping an eye on that ever since they hit the high of 1,600. That high was actually, to be exact, 1,670 and 50 cents per 1,000 board feet. It is currently under 800. Woohoo! This is big news. Yeah, the previous low in the last year, I think, was 400 and something. Let me see if I can find that. Yeah, it's 432 was the previous low. Before that, if you go back further, it was somewhere hovering around the 200 to 300s. I think it was. Let me make sure let's see. The 259 was the low in April 1st of 2020. And that's actually one of the lowest it had been in a long time. So I wonder if that was part of the impact from the pandy that we had there.
The pandy.
Yeah. Well, we try not to say it too much because we don't get it censored, from the whole.
That's funny. I was going to say Oprah's going to be handing out 2x4s instead of cars pretty soon, right?
For you and you and you. Yeah, that's basically what my reel was about. I happened to list a log cabin that is all wood. And so I did a late night television. What'd you say, Dan?
I said tear it down, use it to build new construction.
I don't know if everybody
Put it
caught that too, right? Like I used that as an example yesterday. I showed my team the video and I'm like the subtle humor that was in that. I'm like, you understand why he's saying it with such fervor, right? And it's one of those reels you could rewatch a couple times. It was awesome.
The other big stat that we're going to talk about today, 30-year interest rates, they averaged 2.93% this week. So the mortgage rates, this story is also from Realtor Magazine. Mortgage rates have remained at or below 3% for 9 consecutive weeks. This is a quote from Nadia Evangelou. So it says many home buyers can benefit from these low rates while some home prices are reaching record highs. That's one of the economists and director of forecasting for the National Association of Realtors. It goes on to quote like the specifics: 30-year fix, 15-year fix, 5-year, all that jazz. But that was in 5 years down to 2.55.
That's crazy.
15-year fixed is, let's see, 2.24. So
Which we do have a future article that it says interest rates average for people putting 20% down. I think it's up more towards 3.2. So I don't know what the discrepancy is, but this under 3 or around 3% must be something, A plus paper where they have the over 800 credit scores, 20% down. So I don't know what the difference is, but we do have an article that Ray will get to that says they're a little bit higher.
Yeah, that's what Kelly was talking about in the pre-show that we had the other day, because the whole quoting an interest rate, quote unquote, you see big companies do that all the time. Then somebody actually applies and the interest rate's like a half a point more or a whole point more.
Right.
And part of that is because they're quoting an interest rate for someone that's literally perfect with a 1,000 credit score, whatever. And so it's kind of an unattainable credit score, but still, that's what.
Yeah, always watch out for those buy down points in the fine print when you see those rates. Or if your clients, any realtors listening, see those rates, you got to look at the fine print and what they're taking into account when they quote those rates.
It's like houses starting in the 300s, and the cheapest house you're actually going to buy is like 650,000.
Oh yeah, that's true. Houses in new construction neighborhoods, houses start 300, but then if you want the granite, if you want cabinetry. Okay, so speaking of home prices, phenomenal transition, Justin. Have you done this before? That's great. Home prices surged in April at a truly extraordinary rate. So this is the S&P Case-Shiller. This report comes to us from CNBC. Basically, home prices in April saw an annual gain of 14.6% in April, which is up from a 13.3% increase in March. Among larger cities covered by the index, 10 city composite, 14.4% year over year, was up from 12.9% in the previous month. So this is a huge gain. April's performance was truly extraordinary. The 14.6% gain. And producer Matt, can you show that chart? It looks like a fake chart. Like it looks like a chart that a kid would draw. Look at the end there. It just kind of goes. So for those of you audio listeners, it's kind of down out in 2010 and 2012. It's under the line, -2, -4. And then it skyrockets in 2014, all the way up 11%. And then it kind of starts to go down again. And then from late 2019 to 2020, it's basically a straight up line. So April's performance was truly extraordinary. The 14.6% gain in the national composite is literally the highest reading in more than 30 years of the S&P CoreLogic Case-Shiller Index data. Said Craig Lazara, managing director for the global head of the investment strategy in S&P Dow Jones Industries. Very interesting. You can read more about this, but is it kind of the same thing happening in Canada? Are you seeing a huge increase in prices, or is it just kind of normal? What's happening where you are, Justin?
Yeah, so it depends on primary, secondary, tertiary markets. That's how I like to break it down. The primary markets are the Vancouvers, the Torontos, and the Montreals. We did see spikes, but not as high as in previous years, because in previous surges pre-COVID, those were the markets that were increasing like 20 to 30%. And meanwhile, we're in these secondary and tertiary markets like London, surrounding area, looking, being like, this is nuts. Like we were 3 to 5% a year. Then we jumped to 17%, which was really high in the 2017 to 2000 market, which was great. But you know what COVID did for our markets? 47% was the increase in value in our market. 47%. So people last year buying houses are selling them literally for pretty much twice as much. This year, it is leveling out. So we run the Canadian Real Estate Networking Room, which we did this morning. And you can see across the country that real heavy COVID surge is tapering off, because all you could do for a year was buy houses in Canada. And now people can go buy underwear and do other things. And all of a sudden,
interesting,
it's really tapering off. And I think we're going to balance back out at that 10 to 17%, because I do think markets like London are undervalued. And it just caused what would have happened in probably 5 years to happen in 1. But I think we're going to go back to stable appreciation, which I think we're all pretty excited about to see some stability in the marketplace.
What's the average price of a home where you guys are?
600, but in 2013 it was 275,000. Just to give you some context.
Say that one more time so that can compute.
Yeah, so I was running conferences in 2013 talking about London. The average price was $275,000. Single family home, detached, great product. Wow. Now that same home, the average price is $600,000.
That is why, and so a lot of that is the growth of Canada itself. But you said that the whole pandemic increased about 50%. Penny, yeah, the whole penny. So are you seeing a disparity between the lower end availability of inventory and then the higher end luxury, or are you seeing luxury still moving very quickly too?
Honestly, you need to know how to surf in this market. It started off as everybody was rushing to the lower end. So anything 200 to 500, 50 showings, 15 offers, like we were seeing 200-300 over asking. Those people got heavily burnt out. It actually moved to luxury for about a 4-month period. So people were listing houses at 900. They were selling for like, I saw as high as 700,000 over asking price on one property. And again, people got heavily burnt out in that space. And then it kind of went back to the mid-range, somewhere in between. But what I have noticed is happening in a big way. People are changing what their buying product was going to be. So instead of buying a single family detached home as your first house, maybe you're buying a townhouse or a condo, or instead of buying a $500,000 house in Byron, maybe you're driving 40 minutes outside of the city. You're going to live in the country. It's not maybe as set as a neighborhood as Byron, but it's growing.
So you're seeing a change in the buying habits, which we'll get into a little bit of that when we talk about the pools thing. Dan, in California, are you guys seeing the same types of increases? Is it more tame than what it sounds like from our northern brother?
No, they're actually about the same. I haven't looked back to 2013 numbers, but that's a crazy stat, and I can only imagine, what it would look like in California as well. But we're seeing, everything. It really depends on the market, bottom third, middle third, or upper third. What the over asking is. Everything is over asking. Now, while that is chilling, and I'm going to cover that a second, while that's calming down, everything's over asking. But, I got into escrow on one property, almost $400,000 over asking a couple weeks ago. So, and that's in LA. LA is a crazy, insane market right now when you get up into that 1.2 and above range. But my main concern here is these numbers we're reading. These are the reports that consumers can see, right? So my biggest concern is that these numbers are essentially ancient at this point. We're 2 months gone from April, and with how quickly this market changes, they're seeing things like, oh, okay, well, the market's still going up. But is it though, or is it settling, and have they missed kind of the peak if they're trying to predict it? These are the things that I really worry about, and I think it's our job to make sure that we need to keep our clients and our consumers that are following our feeds and our our email chains and all that stuff. We need to keep them current. I think it's our job. I think it's our duty. I think it's our responsibility to keep them current, because things are changing so rapidly right now. And there's a couple articles coming up that are going to kind of, say buyer fatigue and all that stuff.
Yeah, we have. So in this article that I was just covering, it does mention, although home price growth is reaching new highs, the risk of price declines has fallen far below the pre-pandy in the summer 2006 levels when home prices last peaked. This is likely because of favorable mortgage rates, continued income growth, and the ratio of mortgage payments to monthly household income much lower. That was Selma Hepp. She's deputy chief economist at CoreLogic. Consequently, elevated buyer demand coupled with lacking for sale inventories will continue putting pressure on prices, which Logan kind of talks about in his article, which we'll cover here shortly. There is, however, a growing divide between the haves and have-nots in housing. So in that vein, the next article, the surging home prices, this one is from Realtor Magazine. Surging new home prices shut out low-end buyers. So rising prices in new home construction have mostly shut out buyers at the lower end of the market, shows a new analyst from the National Association of Home Builders. Buyers at the bottom 1/4 of the market have had to look exclusively at the stock of existing homes. In other words, zero homes, new construction at the bottom 1/4 of the market. Fast rising prices in existing home market may soon price out buyers as well. So the median price of a newly built single family home that was started in 2020 was $336,000. 79% of those homes were priced between $250,000 and $1 million. Almost none were priced under $150,000. So in Arkansas, there's a couple of builders that we have that have been known to create these like $180,000, $170,000, $150,000 neighborhoods. And those have even increased just simply due to the lack of inventory that we have and the availability of the money. There's still cities in our area that qualify for rural development loans. Do y'all have like a rural development loan program or something like that in Canada where it's like zero down if you're in the rural area that they try to, encourage growth in those areas?
No, I mean, there's a lot of things I think we can take from south of the border, constant wise. It goes by municipality. So some of them encourage development, but it kind of happening naturally. So before, they would encourage developers to go out there and build quite a bit more. They'd roll out the red carpet for them. But now the secondary and tertiary markets are making it more difficult because it's like they're the driver's seat. So now they're making demands for developers to come in and do certain things that the municipalities would have had to pay for, and developers are like, no problem, we'll go somewhere else. So there's a bit of a dance going on in the development world up here.
That's interesting. In that article, wait, let me go back to it. It just accidentally closed it there. What was that last thing that they were saying? Prices rising even more than 2021. The median price of a new home in May climbed 18% year over year. The median price for an existing home in May was $350,000. That's nearly 24% from a year earlier. So construction costs are rising. We talked a lot about materials pricing when lumber shot up. Metal wasn't that far behind. It didn't do the increase that lumber did, but it was still up. I think it got up to 30%. It may still be going up there. All right, so we have two more articles. I'm going to kind of consolidate them a little bit because I do want to get to Logan's article. I might just change the order on that real quick. So we're going to talk about this May home sales rebound, and then as a housing boom begins to fizzle. So question to real estate professionals in Clubhouse and also in the chats. I see you guys, by the way, on YouTube. Sorry, I'm driving a lot. As housing begins to fizzle, weekly mortgage demand falls nearly 7%. Record high volume and price appreciation is sidelining even more buyers, which we were just talking about. Weekly mortgage demand is falling along with it. It's down 6.9% for the week, according to Mortgage Bankers Association seasonally adjusted index. So that's the lowest in almost a year and a half. Mortgage applications to purchase a home. So we've been tracking this a long time. We'd see the fluctuation in the overall mortgage application number. A lot of that had to do with the fluctuation in the refis. When rates would tick down a little bit, people would jump on the refi bandwagon, and then that whole number would go up. But the mortgage application volume was still kind of ticking up. And a big thing that we were talking about is if you compare this year to last year and you're just looking at year over year numbers, that's going to be skewed because the whole pandy thing. So we were wondering, as that fleshed out, where would we be? So the mortgage applications to purchase a home dropped 5% for the week and were 17% lower annually. Now, if you recall what was happening last year about this time, it was like a frenzy to buy houses, because about this time people could go see the houses. They were applying for a loan. They were trying to jump on these homes because you had like 2 months of nothing, of inactivity, basically. And so I'm wondering if that number is artificially low. And so the article talks about how it's fizzling out but I don't see a lack of demand in our area. Last week, there was a slight change in that, but I'm wondering if that was due to Father's Day or if that was actually because there are some seasonal things that happen around Father's Day in the couple of weeks of June that you normally see like a little slight dip. So are we being fooled by both the weirdly high number last year from 2 months of pent up demand plus the holiday and the seasonal things that normally happen? Or are you guys actually seeing lower demand and the demand for housing start to fizzle? Justin, what do you see?
I think it's a combination of things. I think, yeah, definitely the number last year being artificially high skews things, right? People equate it to this, right? So somebody makes $250,000 of equity on their property because the market's amazing and everything's kind of happened, but they're so focused on maybe making an extra 50 grand because the market's hot. So instead of worrying about the 250 they made, they're focused on the 50 they're not going to make because maybe the market isn't increasing at the same pace. I think the buyer demand's the same thing. An active indicator are how many people are going and getting applications, but I think there's a direct correlation to that. To people hunting for houses, a lot of people wait until the last second. Like they work with people like you. We know they're solid. They got good jobs and they've been financially capable for a very long time. They've done pre-approvals over the years to know kind of where they are. They have a really good sense of equity. And, you know, if they got to pull it together in 2 weeks, then they will. So I don't necessarily think a direct correlation of applications is what's happening in the market because the demand is still there. I see buyers leaning a lot more on their professionals for advice of when is the right time to buy. Because in the last 2 weeks, we have smashed deals for a specific class of property type we've been going after because there's a dip in that market. There's a surge of inventory and still the same number of buyers. So we've been managed to get conditions and offers, which feels like magic and all of these things we couldn't do before. So I don't think that the buyer demand is what it was last year, but I don't know that it will be for a very, very long time. I think we're going to a strong, healthy, stable market. I mean, I think the buyer's confidence is still there. I just think maybe they're not rushing to get applications done because think of last year too. The last point I'll make, when they did rush, it was right after we realized it wasn't the zombie apocalypse. Like there was a 1 month period where I was walking outside being like, is my neighbor have it? Like, yeah, nice to see you, but stay away from me a little bit. Because we didn't know, right? Like it was something that could have decimated the world. And a lot of people, you know, did get their businesses decimated. And I don't want to dilute that by any means. But when people realized that the housing market wasn't going to collapse, it was the zombie apocalypse towards housing. Everybody kind of rushed towards it. So I think it's tapered off, but I think the demand is still there.
Yeah, if your house was for sale last year about this time, it felt like the zombie apocalypse with everyone trying to crawl through your windows and doors and just kind of slowly walking up to your home. Dusty Martin says, and Dan, I want to get your opinion of what's happening in the market in your area if you see it start to fizzle right now. Of course, you're kind of on a vacation, so maybe you do feel it. Dusty Martin says in Arizona, it was Father's Day and 117 degrees. It's our traditional summer slump because most people leave Arizona. But my listing that launched with the slump had the most offers of any other listing this year. Wow. So, and our quote increase in supply is the same number that we were complaining about last year that was too low. That's interesting. Melissa Mars says she's having a bump of people looking to buy. Summer season is always like this here, though, because there's a huge first and second home market. Yeah, I guess you have people like vacationing in your area, and then they're like, "While we're here, let's go look at a couple of vacation homes, see if we want to buy them." I can see that happening. Dusty says, and the offers I'm seeing this year at this amount of supply is crazy compared to the offers I got last year. Last year, no buyer's agent was willing to give the sellers a credit out of their co-broke. This year, they are. Yeah, I'm seeing that too. So it is a change. If you compare right now in my marketplace to 2 months ago, I think I said this last week, 2 months ago, we get like 20 offers for a property. Right now, we're only getting 4 or 5 offers, but those 4 or 5 offers are way better than the 20 offers that we were receiving. Dan, real quick, what are you seeing in your market? Are you seeing it fizzle out a little bit? Are you seeing it slow down, or is it just as strong?
Yeah. Well, by the way, yes, I am on vacation. We're literally driving to a Rockies game as we speak. So what we're seeing, and I do have actually a Denver, Colorado update for you as well, which is very similar to what's happening in Southern California. But the kind of mid-range market is what's seeing the, I guess you could call it the leveling. It's not really a leveling in regards to pricing. Things are still getting bid up and still getting top dollar. But I got into escrow. I got into buyer accepted. I had no other offers to compete against. We were the only offer, and we're VA. So that right there was different than just 3 months ago. We're getting cut off. Oh, this is interesting. So this is like the people when they're commenting along on the show and they're driving with us. So I'm going.
Oh my god.
And my friend, a friend of the show, Lindsay Emerson, is seeing the same thing. So if you're selling in the bottom third market, you can then kind of get into that mid-range market. But if you're selling in the mid-range market, you may not get much activity, especially if you're moving to that top range market, which you're going to face a lot of competition. So we are seeing a slowing, I'll call it. How about I'll make up a word this week, call it slowing, a slowing, where that mid-range market is not seeing much at all. And it's the same as Ray is talking about. It's not only less offers, it's just less showings. One of our listings, instead of getting like what it would really be is 40 or 50 showings over the weekend, it got 6. And it's kind of the dialed property. It's the one everyone wants. But, then again, we do get all those offers are kind of the more solid offers that you want to take. So, yeah, we're seeing similar things. And I do, again, I think Justin kind of mentioned it. It's our job that, people are more and more turning to professionals to get their info, and hopefully that kind of trend continues.
I want to go again and some of his articles, and he's actually joining us on Clubhouse, so he'll be able to comment specifically about it. I'm like I told him that it is one of the Housing Wire Plus articles, and we want to support Logan. So I'm going to give like a brief synopsis. Actually, he could probably do a better job of that. But I want to post, right? Let's let him talk about his own article. Okay, Ray. So I'll post a link to his article, or producer Matt, you can post a link to his article in the comments. That way people can find that. We'll also link it up in the description after the show. But Logan, you said initially in the pre-show, just in the couple of minutes before we went live, that a lot of people were getting this article wrong, and you said it was almost as if they hadn't read it. So the headline is, the housing market inventory is about to get better. High prices are likely to fall. So this is my question to you based on this article, and you can kind of get into some of the data you cover. Are you going to see a situation in which we see the quote home price gains slow? Or will you actually see that some of the gains that we're seeing now are not sustainable and that they will pull back a little bit?
So regarding what's happening with the housing data, remember, all housing data is completely jacked up because of COVID. So people are trying to interpret these monthly sales prints or these purchase application prints and try to make a bigger macro story out of it when not much is happening. And to your, when you were addressing the purchase application data, when you do some COVID adjustments, really from the heat months, which is really the key of the entire data line, in the second week of January to the first week of May, total volumes always fall after May. We're up mid-single digits. That means not much is happening, but it's still positive. What's happened is that last year, for the first time ever in history, we had makeup demand within like 2.7 million homes were in a sense bought within a 6-month period. So all housing data is messed up in that. And like a lot of my work is trying to tell people, listen, housing data is going to moderate. And when it does, don't make too much out of it, because there's going to be people that are going to say, look, home sales are crashing. Guess what happened today? Pending home sales not only beat, but beat by a lot, like a 9% beat. All we're trying to do in housing is trying to find a base to work off from. So in the inventory story, I remember back in 2018 when mortgage rates had gone up to 5%, the existing home sales market didn't really feel the pinch too bad. The new home sales market did. But a lot of people misread the supply data. They look at the monthly supply data and they think housing is like really getting weak, even though like 96% of the year-over-year data and purchase applications were positive. Wasn't positive by much, but still positive. Total inventory hardly budged from 2018 to 2019. So the inventory levels that I put in that article are to give people some perspective on what I would consider an actual healthy market, because what everyone wants is choices and get this bidding war stuff out of it. Because when it's all said and done, total home sales are going to be slightly higher this year than last year, but the price gains are so much more this year. Like literally year over year, real home price gains adjusted into inflation, the equivalents of rent, have gone straight vertical. That's not because like we have a credit boom, and that's like a big theme of my work. Our purchase application data looks nothing like what we saw from 2002 to 2005. Like compare 2018 to 2021, it's nothing like that. But because we have a raw shortage of homes, it seems like there's this unbelievable bubblicious demand, and we're on the verge of collapsing, because it's not the case. It's just that we have a little bit more buyers in 2020 and 2021, and the theme is that more Americans are buying homes with mortgages. It's not BlackRock, it's not investors, it's not cash buyers, mortgages, than we had from 2008 to 2019. So when pending home sales came out today, people are like, wait a second, wait, home sales were falling, purchase applications down. No, purchase applications are going to be negative for the rest of the year because the comps are impossible, right? I even wrote that back in March. I said, just don't try to read too much into that. When you see data get weak, the existing home sales would be trending at about 5.3 million, around there. We're not there at all. We're like still a 500,000 higher. So every single home sale print this year has been higher than what the total sales were last year for the existing home sales market, which is about 5.64 million, which is only 130,000 more than 2017 levels. So it's the data is so wild that it seems like a lot is happening, but a lot of the action is in prices of existing homes, and of course lumber prices. We saw that spike and a collapse. So you have what I always try to put sticky replacement demand, right? That's just people, just the raw size of Americans needing homes is mother demographics just crushing any of the housing bears, really. So when we want to look at total inventory levels, I put numbers in there because what I see people doing, they're taking percentage increases, working from all-time lows, and trying to make a really big macro theme out of it, when seasonality always happens where February, happens, and that's the spring, and you see a natural inventory increase, and then when fall and winter comes, a decrease. That happens every single year. I wouldn't read too much in that, but what we want to see is total inventory levels back above 1.52 million, which is a couple 100,000. And now it's odd for me that I'm even having this conversation, because 1.52 is like record lows, in the previous year. But that in itself should cure the bidding war fights. So that should be the goal. 1.52 million to 1.92 was basically 2018 and 2019 levels. Existing home sales trended between roughly like 4.98 million to 5.61 million. That is a little bit of a healthy market pace, because guess what? We have people that want to buy a home, right? Whoever's saying, well, I'm just going to hold out and wait until the cooling market, that person has probably lost at least 11 or 12 bids on a house. So the faster we get there, the better it is, because you never want to see, and again, this is the fear about years 2020 to 2024. It's because total inventory levels have been falling since 2014. Yep. What's the other correlation data? Purchase application has been rising since 2014. This is a primary mortgage home buyer marketplace. So that runs what the data line is showing, except now, because housing 10 years at 10 years, we had the pandemic, the functionality of the housing market is just not normal. So hopefully, when the moratorium ends, when forbearance ends, when things are back to normal, you get a little bit of inventory, and try not to make too much out of it, because we've been so inundated by this by 2008. I mean, and think about it, it's not just the housing market. Look at the US economy. It recovered, literally bottomed out in April, and has been rising ever since. We get out of that mode, and we want to track data properly, right? So we're already starting to think about what 2022 is going to look like. That's where we should be focusing. But when inventory rises, don't look at the percentages, look at the total inventory levels. And if we still get up to 1.52 million, it is historically very low, but it should just cool the market down in terms of bidding wars. That's it. More days on market is actually the number one priority, and the healthiest thing that can happen for housing. So you get off this bidding war, which means the rate of growth of prices should come down. And that's what the theme of the article. When this happens, the rate of growth should come down. But I also challenged my own self and said, okay, so how can I be wrong here? Because it's actually years 2022 to 2023 that is the best housing demographic sweet spot in the history of US going back to 1790. So the next 2 years, that's the, the Willy Wonka golden ticket. We're never going to have so many Americans looking to buy a home than the 2 years next year. So hopefully I'm right, where inventory just channels up higher and we just cool this down. If I'm wrong, that means the inventory increase we see now, which will fade in the fall and winter, we start back up again and nothing really changes much. We're still below that 1.52 million. So that's why I wanted to write that, just to give people some perspective, because back in 2018 and 2019, where people, housing's crashing, literally total inventory did nothing. Nothing. It was still below 2014, 15, 16, and 17 levels. But people just, they get caught up into this housing hype without actually looking at data. So my work is a lot is to show people, these are the things you should track if you're trying to make a big macro and a theme on housing. Every market is different, right? We all have our different markets. Of course, here in Irvine, California, it's much different than a lot of places, but the national data typically trends the same. And when you see the Case-Shiller price index, you look at the top 20 states, home prices are literally looking parabolic everywhere, right? Because it's a raw shortage of homes. And it's not like there's a credit boom. And that's why I use those purchase application charts that I use. I really want to stress that. We have slight growth, which is good. Pre-cycle highs in demand, first world problems, right? Where, it's not like, housing is crashing by 50% and people are losing their homes. It's the opposite kind of problem. Inventory shortage, demand is fine, but it's not booming to the sense where it would almost warrant these 15% price gains. And remember, Case-Shiller lags, like it was discussed before. We're probably going to have another hot print next. But you can see in that article the inventory increases. Hopefully the next few months it just cools things down. We get a rate of growth decline and we try to stabilize, because today's pending home sale that was positive beat by 9% really estimates were like, people are like, wait a second. Home sales were falling. No, they weren't. You have to adjust from the COVID-19 parabolic rise in sales, which is a lot of economic data. A lot of economic data looks like housing data. It went straight vertical, V-shape, past the V-shape. It's coming down, and we're trying to find that base. And once we find that base, it's a little bit more reasonable to talk about sales. That's the hardest thing for me to do, is to try to find these levels to where sales are without making a big macro theme. And that's we're starting to get there, which I think will be more healthy in having the real authentic housing discussion going out for 2022.
One of the things, Logan, that I noticed in your article, I'm going to show this chart. It was kind of eye-opening for me as I saw the lineup of the generations, from the baby boomers to the millennials. I think producer Matt has that up. Can you put that? Let me see if I can do that for you. Bam. That's right. Oh, there it goes. So you can see at the top here the age demographics and how things were kind of laid out between those who are 100 years old down to 75. Then you have this orange part, which has the baby boomer generation. Then you have the under, I guess, 50 and under, down to this blue section of millennials. And that's what you're talking about with the replenishing demand, isn't it?
Yes. When I use the term replacement demand, what does the United States of America have that a lot of countries don't? We have a lot of young people working and consuming. Like, our prime age labor force growth is going to be positive for decades, while other countries are going down. China's going down, Japan's going down, Europe's going down, not us. Like, you think of millennials and Gen Z combined together, it's bigger than the total population of Japan right now. And Gen Z is a massive group too, much bigger than Gen X was. So people are, they're years away from getting to their home buying age, but still, we have a lot of young people that need shelter. So you have to look at that as the replacement buyer. So if you like, at conferences in the previous expansion, I always said the same things. People rent, they date, they mate, they get married. 3.5 years after marriage, they have kids. They typically could buy homes if they make good enough money. That really hasn't changed. But in the previous expansion, we were too young and too old to have net purchase application demand get up to 300. That's the level that I've used for the last decade. But years 2020 to 2024 are historic in the sense that we have the biggest home buying age group all coming in a 5-year period. Then on top of that, you think of move up buyers, move down buyers, cash buyers, investors. You have to take the aggregate net whole of demand, put it into a 5-year period. And then on top of that, mortgage rates are at all-time lows. So if you follow the downtrend in the bond market and the mortgage rates for 4 decades, what's it telling you? Things are going to go lower. They're going to stay lower, right? So the fear should have always been that home prices could escalate. Here, the inventory shortage, even though literally it's really crazy to think about this, but we're not going to have much sales growth. We're still going to be slightly higher, but you see this price increase. So the inventory shortage, the raw shortage of inventory is the thing that's really driving this. So the higher the total inventory level goes, the best thing that could happen for housing is that, because we want less bidding wars. We want people to have choices. We want a seller to say, hey, I could put my home in the market and there's plenty of homes that I could buy. I don't have to worry or be stressed out. The quicker that happens, the better it is for housing, because this is just chaos and madness at this point. And we see the inventory levels are already rising. So that's fine. That's what we want to see. We should be rooting for something like that.
And I think a lot of that had to do kind of like with the perfect storm, right? Instead of a lot of the millennials graduating college, dating, getting married, buying their first house, they graduated college, they dated, and then they dated, and they stopped dating for a while. Then they dated, then they finally got married a little bit older than the previous generation, and then they moved in with mom and dad for a little bit. Then they bought their first house in like the 30s. So for me, I bought my first house when I was like 35, 36. So, my parents bought their first house years ahead of when I did. And that's kind of creating the perfect storm. The other thing that's happening is, and this may be anecdotal, Logan, you can tell me if I'm wrong, please do. But I'm seeing a lot of the baby boomer generation. They're not really downsizing like the previous generation. They are right sizing for whatever their family size is. So of all the baby boomers and older baby boomers who are buying houses right now with me, none of them are going to a smaller house. All of them are going to a home that works for them. And when our kids and grandkids come back for the holidays, they're looking for like a master on the main level with a kitchen and living area, maybe one more bedroom. And then they're not really looking for anything else downstairs. Upstairs, they want several rooms. They never really have to go upstairs, but there's a couple of rooms and a bonus. And I think that trend is keeping a lot of the homes that would normally be what we would consider quote unquote young family homes, it's making a more competitive environment, at least in our marketplace, because you're seeing baby boomers buying these huge houses and they're doing it. And I wonder if part of it is from the pandemic too, buying these huge houses so that people will come back to them. They have like a landing spot for their family instead of like the old days, people would get a homestead, right? And you'd go out to the homestead if anything went wrong. Now they're like buying a big home. Are you seeing any of that?
Here's the thing with that. 1975, the median square foot of a house was, I think, like 1,400. 2014, the median square of a home being built was 2,700. Family sizes have been falling because we're having less kids. Typically, wealthier countries have less kids per family. So we have put into a product for 6 decades. The homes that have been built could, in a sense, fit a family of 4.
Sorry, I got a
Be
call.
even a condo. So it's not the distribution of affordable. Like everybody says, there's no affordable homes. What the hell does an affordable home mean? An affordability of a home is based on what your income is. We don't build small homes anymore. This is not the 50s, 60s, and 70s.
Yeah.
We've been building bigger and bigger and bigger homes for a long time. Now, what had happened was after 2014, the builders had, which was like the biggest miss in their sales estimates ever, they said, okay, we need to build a little bit more smaller homes in the sales mix. So they started to incorporate smaller homes. So the size of single family homes actually had been falling since 2014, not dramatically, but enough to look at the data, and it actually changed up the median sales price for new homes because of the sales mix. And now, in about a month or two, we're going to get the updated. Bigger homes are going to be in the vogue again. So the baby boomers, like a lot of the terrible, like honest to God, terrible housing crash people, are these people who believe, like in the silver tsunami, that all baby boomers are going to sell their homes, at the same time, and they're going to sell it at 50, 60, 70% discount to where they were now, just because the millennials can't afford them. It was a very terrible thesis anyway. It's more of a marketing gimmick. But boomers are not downsizing. They're working longer. things have changed, so
Yeah.
every decade things change. So the velocity of inventory, that's why I always stress to people, look at 2014 total inventory levels. They've been falling, even when the first baby boomer turned 62 in 2008. So the velocity of inventory is different. That's why the housing tenure issue is really an important talking point, because from 1985 to 2007, it was 5 years. Post 2008, it was 10 years. It's going to be probably 11 years after this year. So the velocity of inventory is just not the same. And, of course, at some point, baby boomers are going to die. What are they going to do with their homes? That's not a 2020 or 2021 or 2022 economic discussion. Okay, that's something in the next decade. So we don't see that kind of velocity in inventory. Even when mortgage rates got to 5% in 2018, 2019, the total inventory levels have been dragging down. It's just that nobody looks at it in that way, even though it's been very evident since 2014. So now, as you can imagine, oh boy, here comes the millennials, here comes the move-up buyers, move-down buyers. You still have a big number of cash buyers, investors. There's why your price gains are going up.
Well, and to that point, they're not all dying as fast as the older generation either, because 60 is like the new 40 now, and people are living longer and healthier lives, and there's more science and research and all that kind of stuff around health too. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in the future. Logan, thank you for joining us and giving us an awesome rundown. You guys check out his article on Housing Wire. Producer Matt put it in the comments, and we'll also put it in the description. But Logan, I appreciate you joining us on Clubhouse, man.
Take care.
Also wanted to talk about Biden. So he is extending the foreclosure ban one last time. This article is on Housing Wire. I couldn't find an original that talked about that they said it was absolutely the last time, but I also found an article talking about the CFPB beefing up protections for struggling homeowners, and it will not ban foreclosures. Instead of banning it, they're putting these three things in place that a homeowner has to go through, or that a servicer has to go through before they foreclose. Number one, before they start a foreclosure, they have to go through a loss mitigation application, and that has to be completed by the borrower. The loan servicer has to confirm that the property is abandoned or under local state laws before starting foreclosure proceedings. I thought that was interesting. And the loan servicers need to make reasonable effort to reach the borrowers before starting any foreclosure proceedings. For those who are behind on their mortgage, the CFPB stipulates that a loan servicer needs to give the homeowners at least three options to avoid losing their home. They can resume regular payments and move any missed or suspended payments to the end of the mortgage. They can modify the loan's length or interest rate, or they can sell the home. Now, in this environment, and one of the things that Logan was talking about is some of the foreclosed properties adding to the inventory. In this environment, Justin, it seems like it would add some to the inventory, but with these stipulations in which would allow people to refinance and stuff, I think the only people that are going to be hitting the market that's currently under forbearance, which that number has also dropped below 4. Last year at this time, it was 8.5%, which Kelly did some research for me and said that. So now it's like 3 what was that stat? It's now, let me move this. It's now 3.91%. So forbearance is at an all-time low. As people begin to exit the forbearance and are refining, it seems like there's going to be far fewer foreclosures because a lot of people that hit the market are going to have plenty of equity in their home. Are you guys seeing that too?
Yeah, so I think Biden called Justin Trudeau. I was like, hey, what are you guys doing up there? Because that's how they operate in Canada. When the REO thing happened and everything happened down south, I have a lot of friends that are in that area, and it was like the Wild West to me, because up here, when a bank sale happens, it's a completely different process than it is in the States, right? You have basically the homeowners have to go through that entire three or four different steps to make sure they had every opportunity in order to try and save that family's house, right? Which I do agree with to a certain extent.
Yeah.
There needs to be loss mitigation, and just shut the door and this family loses their home. Like, these are human beings we're talking about. Where I'll edge on the side of being devil's advocate is anytime there's government intervention in the marketplace and they add bureaucracy and steps and red tape, it actually slows the marketplace down and hampers housing supply and actually ultimately hurts the consumer. Right? Just like right here, right now, they're talking about there's a massive lack of supply, But at the same time, they're shutting down a development that I can literally see from my office right now that would bring on 350 homes to this marketplace because they need to do a official plan review, even though the official plan calls for density improvement. That's perfect for what they're calling for. We're going to be a year to 2 years of red tape before that gets developed, right? So that would be my main point of concern is, bureaucracy or non-industry bodies coming in and regulating an industry they don't necessarily understand. Going back to our conversation about leadership, if people are heading this program that are thoughtful, are intelligent, and look at it from both a business and a human perspective and find a balance in between the two where you can take care of people, give them every chance to, get their home saved before they lose it, great. If not, help them with that transition, because that's the other side of the coin is when houses do have to go into foreclosure. What is that transition like? Like, what are you doing to help those people move on to the next stage of their life? Whether that means they're renting, whether that means, they're dealing in bankruptcy. There's two things that need to happen. You got to deal with the individuals and you got to deal with the houses, but I'm big on efficiencies and a balanced marketplace. And I just hope this doesn't slow that down.
Yeah, it seems like there's a lot of foreclosures that probably should hit the market, that would have hit the market anyway in this last year, that have it doesn't, like the pandemic wouldn't have affected it at all. If there had been no pandemic, there are people that don't pay their bill that leave a house and it's currently vacant. So I'm glad that those are going to finally get to hit the market. And hopefully that will relieve a little bit of that and also give some investors some options on what to do. But overall, I agree with you. Finding a human way to deal with the foreclosures that will be coming that are due to the pandemic, I think is the smart way. One weird aspect about this is the landlords who are currently, they have tenants in their homes that aren't paying them. And the other thing that what was it, the CFPB? No, the CDC, they extended the national eviction ban. Do y'all have an eviction ban where you are too?
We do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They extended through July here. So you have to show a hardship though. So you have to either have medical bills or you have to have lost your job or something like that. So you have to be able to show that there's a hardship in order for you to not pay your rent, basically. And I think if you don't pay your rent, there should be or will be some relief going to the tenants and landlords. If you're already facing eviction, this is funny, this spokesperson, I think for the government, he said, if you're already facing eviction, tell your landlord, tell them this is going to be pushed back another month. That's what you do. I thought that was that's great legal response there. So it's an all hands on deck challenge to help the landlords that are hurt but keep families in their home. That's what the White House is trying to do. So the eviction moratorium, in another article on CNBC, talks about really hurting the mom and pop landlords. I call them also accidental landlords, people that tried to sell their home a couple of years ago that couldn't. Now they have a tenant in there that they can't sell the house because they can't evict the tenant. So it's creating some major issues for people that didn't expect to have financial trouble. They had a tenant in there that was paying, and then now this happens. Okay, let me jump down. We have a couple more articles to cover in a very short time to do it. I want to talk about this pool frenzy. Did you guys see an increase in the number of people that were searching for a home that had a office, a pool, a fitness area? Did you see like an overall increase in the desire for that kind of thing?
I literally just did a consult on a property where the difference in pricing is going to be, I would say 1.75 if they didn't have a pool. And then we're going to get 2 million plus if they do have a pool with all the fancy bells and whistles, right?
Wow.
So pool's about 90 grand to put in, where previously that pool would have been 60 grand for the base and then 30 grand for a nice concrete setup and everything else. So, I mean, pools weren't always cheap. Just they weren't super highly desirable. Now you can't even get them. Even now, you still can't get them.
In the show prep show we did yesterday, there were several agents that were talking about how there are some pool companies that won't even touch a pool if it's less than $60,000.
Yeah.
Which in our area, you could get a $30,000 or $40,000 pool pretty easily. The article is from Realtor Magazine. You guys look it up. It's got some great pictures in there that you could add to your Instagram and say, would you rather have this pool or that pool? One of them is like a real small, like I call it like a soaking tub pool, but it's super modern looking and square. It looks really cool. But the old kidney style pools are kind of long gone. Mm-hmm. They also have a really cool, producer Matt can bring it up. It's a BioNova natural pool. And so not only are people looking for pools, but they're also looking for like statement pieces. They're not just throwing an above ground pool in their backyard. they're really doing it right. And it's interesting, if you're in a neighborhood in which most of your neighbors don't have a pool, I used to tell people that you're not going to get exact value. If you pay $60,000 for a pool and put it in, you probably won't get that $60,000. So divide it by the time that you expect to live in the home and make sure that you're okay. If you want to live there for 20 years, that's $3,000 a year. Are you okay paying $3,000 a year over that 20-year period to enjoy whatever pool that you want to if it costs you 60 grand to put in? But now I think a lot of that has changed, and I don't know when that is going to change back. I still don't think it's like a dollar for dollar immediately. Like if you put in a pool today, could you sell the pool now and get that dollar for dollar out in most neighborhoods in our area? No, because there are also community pools and stuff like that still in our area. But I think people want it more. More and more of our consults, people are saying we want to buy a house in which we could put a pool in the backyard. I want to get to, let's see, Mike Elizabeth Rodell said pool companies here are a year out. Yep. There's a lot of pool companies that aren't taking on any more service contracts because they're kind of extended. Let's see. I'm just making sure. Okay. Mike Elizabeth Rodell also said that we totally bought a homestead mansion with a turret and defense space for tons of toilet paper in next apocalypse. The turret is amazing. They literally have like this castle turret thing in the corner of it's pretty awesome.
So Nerf guns are a new thing in my life. That would be epic. And do not go buy a single Nerf gun because then you will buy 1,000 Nerf guns.
Yes.
That's my piece of advice.
Yeah, one year for Christmas, I got my entire family Nerf guns, but I unpackaged them, I loaded them, and I put them in gift bags. And then I had one, right? And so everyone opened at the same time. They all opened, and like I'm talking like my mom and dad and our kid, like grandkids, everybody had Nerf guns. So they opened the bag, saw the Nerf gun, and my brother pulled it out first, and I shot him. And then it was like an hour and a half long Nerf battle. So if you ever want a fun Christmas, you've got to do that. And yes, I did shoot my mom. Okay. So we're seeing an increase in that. Higher risk homes. So this is a really cool metric from, I think it's CoreLogic. Are higher risk homes cheaper? So the impact of climate change on property values, and it's just talking about natural disasters in general. So there's new data out. Let's see, the threat of natural hazard risk in the United States is on the rise, according to National Centers of Environmental Information. There were 22 weather-related climate disasters in 2020, cost over $1 billion, nearly 150% more than the average of 16.2% in the recent 5 years, and 3 times the average of 7.1% in the last 40 years. But what effect does it have on those properties? So I'm trying to find the quote where it talks about the new metric that they had. In analyzing the relationship between property values and natural hazard risk, the former was estimated with the total home value X at a new state-of-the-art automated valuation model from CoreLogic that leverages artificial intelligence and machine learning capabilities built on cloud technology that reflects the price of recently sold similar properties nearby. Properties in the same neighborhood were used to serve as a control value for the differences between markets. In addition, hazard risk, it goes into the details. To analyze the hazard risk scoring, Ottawa Ranch, all properties in the community were plotted on a map with blue dots to indicate the properties with lower hazard risk and red dots for those with higher. Of the 2,546 residential properties in Otay Ranch, 942, or nearly 40% of them, passes the high risk. The average home value for the high hazard risk properties, $697,000, as compared with the neighborhood average of $773,000. So that's almost a $75,000 gap. So this is a new metric. Look for it. So in more CoreLogic reporting, we did an article not too long ago that said that some third-party company was going to be predicting the hazard risk of floods based on climate change and posting it on websites like Zillow, Realtor.com, and such. Which this is not where properties are currently flooding. This is based on data analytics and research where they think properties will be flooding in the future, and then they're posting that information. And I don't necessarily like that. I think historic information is great, but until they can get more accurate in some of those predictions, you could have a phenomenal house that gets disparaged because of this computer model that it thinks 20 years down the road it's going to flood here. I'm not a fan of that.
I say go for it, because you're going to showcase to the consumers why cloud technology and data analytics and artificial intelligence and robots can tell you the future. Like, the fact of the matter is, we all know internally in the industry the amount of laughable data that we see interpreted one way or the other. You ultimately need somebody that understands context of that data. I agree with you. I think it is going to hamper and hurt certain properties. And I disagree with it. I don't think it should be looked at that way, because I mean, literally, they said it was going to rain here every single day for the last week, and it's been beautiful and sunny. So, even people who are in the business of doing nothing but weather sometimes get it wrong. So I would be very cautious as a consumer if you are looking at sites like that to give you buying decisions, to go a couple levels deeper and work with somebody who actually knows how to interpret data.
There you go. Melissa Barr said, no, they aren't. LOL. Want to see the prices of a waterfront bungalow now and 5 years ago? So yeah, there are some areas, I guess, where a flood could be a feature. All right. So this is the last story that we're going to cover today. I wanted to get it out. You can now choose and design a newly built home and put it in your shopping cart as big builders launch virtual home buying. Literally buying a home and then having them build it for you by putting it in your shopping cart, Amazon style. Really, quote, really what our industry needs to do is catch up with the world of e-commerce and what every other industry is doing, said Cheryl Palmer, CEO of Taylor Morrison. That doesn't mean that everybody will buy a house online, but we want to make sure to give the control to the consumer, that they can communicate with us and what they want to do. Let's see, a few years ago, people laughed about buying your car online, and now I just bought a house online, exclaimed Moore, and added that a part of the reason she did it was the coronavirus. That was really convenient. So what do you guys think? I want to kind of gauge the pulse. And if you're in Clubhouse and you want to add your 2 cents to this, I'd really want to know what do you guys think of this? We already know that some home builders are trying to cut agents out completely. I know Matt LaMarche used to work for Circuit City, which is now out of business. But what a lot of people would do when Circuit City was going out of business is Circuit City became the showroom. And you would go into Circuit City and see everything they had. And then you would go onto the early Amazon or the early internet and buy whatever you wanted, which people were also doing on with Best Buy. Now, Best Buy is way more competitive. I don't know if you guys have noticed it lately, but Best Buy is way more competitive with their prices than they ever were. So how do you feel about this, Justin? You've got a lot of new developments and stuff like that happening around you. Do you see this being a huge boom? Do you see it in the future making real estate agents like Circuit City? What's going to happen?
Well, I think the nature of our whole industry is doing that by itself, right? I think technology, I mean, we can go deep on this conversation, Ray. I know you know my thoughts on brokerage and industry, and I think we're changing from being transactional, hey, got to throw a sign up on your lawn and be a salesman, to being advisors, like trusted advisors. And I make a comparison to a very large farm transaction I was consulting on last week. And they could go tender sale. They could call a lawyer, and the lawyer could put a tender sale. They could literally put a sign in their front lawn. They'll probably have 20 offers on the property. But I said the one thing that we can do that lawyer can't is the marketing, the branding, and the exposure. Not only that, the network that we've built over the last, say, 10 years, we can tap them into that, right? Much larger than just the same local farm buyers that they're going to have access to if they just put a sign on their front lawn and play one point to a lawyer. And I think take that concept and apply it to real estate. I do think the Circuit City realtors are going to go away because they're going to get replaced by technology, and you just click buy, get it done. And there's value in that. Some people will buy properties just like they'll buy off wholesalers, sight unseen. They don't care. It fits their model. They have a 30% loss built into their pro forma. Like that, their time is more valuable than caring about consulting. And then there's other people, much higher level people that I work with, that will just send me something and say, what number do I put on paper? And we'll literally not even read the contract I send them, because there's that trust level that we've built over the years. And I'll call them and I'll say, A, B, C, and D, this is the contract. This is what you're paying me for. And I think that's where the whole market's going to go. I think developers are going to go that way. I think they're going to work, they'll have in-house sales teams, or they'll work with an extension of who they are, and somebody that can come in and do brand amplification and can do things that realtors these days just can't do, because they're not equipped to handle business at that scale, in my opinion.
That's good. Mike Elizabeth Rodell says, build wise, not existing homes. Well, what do you mean by that? She said those are too hard to rate condition wise, but brand new totally, especially with software like IKEA Kitchen to see the layout. Yeah, I could see some like artificial intelligence stuff where you can kind of walk around the house. You know, that's already available now. You can do a 360 tour of a home and you can put the goggles on and walk around. But what you may not know is you can actually do a 360 tour of a non-existing home using the build plans and elevations uh, from the builder. You can actually do a whole like 360 tour, walk around the future house that's not even there, that doesn't even exist. Laura Walker says, I would love to buy Elon Musk style box free prefab house online and have it as a vacation home in a heartbeat, and could sell 1 million of them in the Ozarks.
Ray, I literally was just reading that comment, and that's kind of the answer to what I was thinking. It depends on what you're buying it for. If I'm building my dream home for my wife and my homestead and my turrets and everything, I'm probably going to go through a 2-year process to do that, right? If I'm buying something like a secondary home in the Muskokas, I might not. Well, I'd probably still design it, but depends on what you're buying and where you're buying it, I think.
Well, if you could design it all online, and you can even see the view in the lot, and you could do like a 360 tour from your future deck and look out and see what the view is going to look like. And it kind of depends on what data, what do you have access to? The gaps in the data is going to be the problem. Whenever you install the floor on the computer and it looks terrible, but in real life that floor would have looked great, that's going to be the issue.
And here's a point that I'm going to make again, where there is value in working with professionals. Like I would pay, if I was building a significant home, I would pay a world-renowned architect to work with me. And if he was passionate about the project and he was as excited about my ideas to really come in and do this. And I think that you cannot get with technology. I do think if you're buying, designing, being able to go through it and you really want to be hands-on, great. But what are you building, right? And why are you building it? I think that's ultimately the question that you have to answer before you're going to buy it off a screen.
Yeah, that's a great point. Scotty, I noticed you came up, you raised your hand, you're in Clubhouse. Tell us who you are, where you work, and what are your thoughts on this, man?
Sure. Thanks for pulling me up. Yes, I'm a broker for the last 20 years or so out of New York City, mostly Manhattan and Brooklyn. So it's certainly a very niche market where I work. But, we've been seeing this for a while, not necessarily the virtual like home building as much as people buying properties virtually here. We've been doing that for quite a while. But also, new developments here, just buying them, off, with a couple choices online, but also virtual. Again, not being able to physically go into the property for even a year or two as it's being built. So it's been happening for like a while here, but it's an interesting concept that I think is going on. And I think depending on how long the time is to get something built and how much choice that buyers are going to have, I think it's an interesting concept. And I think buyers love the idea of being able to craft their own space.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Scotty. Thanks for the input, man. And with that, I think we'll end the show there. So, Scotty, you had the last word. I appreciate it. Justin, could you tell everybody where they could find you on the interwebs, man, and your podcast too?
Oh, if you want to talk to me face to face, come on the Instagrammies, justin.conico. If you want to see where I'm really trying to build my real rocket ship, my smallest channel is YouTube. So I tell you to go there. Prime People Podcast hosted on YouTube every Thursday from 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And Google Justin Conico and Ray Ellen. You can watch me and Ray chopping it up. We had a lot of fun. And I appreciate you having me. This was a wicked show. And I genuinely want to tell you, as a consumer of content, very valuable. It's concise. It's organized. You put a lot of effort into it. So everybody share this out and smash that like button. And if you're not subscribed, do that right now.
I appreciate you, Justin. Thank you. And you can find me at Razorback on the Instagrams, RAYZORBACK. We appreciate you guys. Don't forget to go tell Dan that you heard him on Clubhouse today too. And also the Practical Tactical Room, Justin. It's one of my favorite rooms on Clubhouse. So be sure you follow Justin on Clubhouse so you guys can see that too. So thanks for joining, and we will see everyone later. Bye, y'all. Bye.
I'm gonna go buy